At the moment I'm writing this, it's already been a few weeks, and I still don't sleep with the lights off. I had just graduated from college. I moved into the cheapest neighborhood I could find. The house is old. The yard is overgrown. The street is almost always empty. And the neighbors are a whole different story. On one side, music blasting until 3 in the morning. On the other, them. Two women. The older one, around 60, always looks at you like you stole something from her. And the younger one isn't just strange. She would stand in the middle of the yard for hours, arms crossed over her chest, rocking back and forth, making sounds that didn't seem human. Sometimes she would suddenly stop, turn her head in my direction, and point, then whisper something to the older woman. More than once I caught myself going back inside, not because it was cold, but because I felt like I was being watched. That night was different. The screaming started around 11, but these weren't the usual fits. This was something else. She screamed like she was being cut open. The older woman shouted back. Something fell, thudded, broke. Half an hour passed, then another. I couldn't take it anymore. I went over there. The door flew open. The older woman stared at me from the dark hallway. "What the hell do you want?" Her eyes were red, not from tears, from anger. I asked them to keep it down. And then the younger one came out from the depths of the house. Slowly, head lowered. Then she suddenly lifted her eyes and screamed. "How dare you?" Not once. Again and again and again. She lunged at me. The older woman barely held her back. The door slammed right in my face. And in that exact second, silence. Absolute. At 3:00 a.m. I woke up. Too early. Too suddenly. I thought I heard something downstairs. I froze. Silence. I almost fell back asleep when it happened again. A quiet, barely audible creak. Not downstairs. In my room. I felt around for my phone. My fingers were shaking. I didn't want to turn on the light. I knew. If I turned it on, I would see something. And I wasn't wrong. By the edge of my bed, there was something dark. Round, motionless. I slowly lifted my phone. The light slid across the floor, across the blanket, along the wooden frame of the bed, and stopped. It was her face. She was lying on the floor, her cheek pressed against my bed, and she was staring at me. Her eyes were open so wide it looked like they were about to tear. And she was smiling. The light fell directly on her. And she screamed. Not like a human. Like an animal being burned alive. I dropped the phone. The room sank back into darkness. But I heard her getting up. Heard her footsteps. She wasn't running. She was slowly walking after me. I bolted for the door, tripped, fell. Felt something cold slide across my leg. I locked myself in the bedroom, locked it, ran downstairs, locked the door leading up. And then she started slamming into the door. Not just slamming. She was hitting it with her head. Once, twice, 3 times. I heard the dull sound of bone against wood. And laughter. She was laughing between the blows. I called the police while the door cracked under the pressure. When the officers arrived, she was already sitting on the hallway floor, calm, smiling. The older woman stood over her, stroking her hair. "She just got confused," she said. One of the officers asked if I wanted to press charges. And then the older woman looked at me. I had never seen a look like that. It wasn't anger. It was a promise. I said no. The police took the younger one away for the night. 5 minutes later, the older woman got into her car and drove off. The next morning, I checked the doors. They were locked. All of them. No signs of forced entry. No broken glass. Nothing. But on the floor beside my bed, there were footprints. Dirty, wet, and they didn't start at the door. They started from under my bed. They still live next door. Sometimes I see the younger one standing by the window and smiling. Now she doesn't point at me anymore. She points down at my house, and I've started wondering, maybe that night wasn't the first time she was in my room. At the moment I'm writing this, it's been 5 years since my neighbor's son disappeared, 13-year-old Ethan. Back then, everyone was talking about it. The police showed up every day. Reporters stood at the end of our street. Michael cried in front of the cameras. His wife, Laura, barely left the house. My wife and I brought them food, offered help, sat with them late into the night. They never found the body. Over time, the news faded. The searches stopped. People stopped asking questions. But inside their house, something died along with that hope. Laura became a shadow of herself. Michael grew nervous, sharp, with a strange glint in his eyes I had never noticed before. And then last week, he asked to borrow my shovel. I didn't even ask why. I just brought him my strongest one, heavy metal. He gripped it like he was afraid I might change my mind and said he'd return it tomorrow. From my second-floor window, I watched him dig. The hole was too big for a flower bed, too deep for a bush. He was digging like he was in a hurry, like his life depended on it. I decided to help. When I walked into his yard, he dropped the shovel abruptly and almost ran toward me. "No," he shouted too loudly, "I've got it." I laughed, trying to ease the tension. "Come on, Mike, it's just a hole." He looked at me like I had just peered straight into his soul. "You are not using that shovel in my yard," he said quietly, "ever." He pointed toward the gate. I left, but something shifted after that. That evening, I kept watching from the window. He dug for a long time. When it got dark, he filled the hole back in. At 1:30 a.m., I woke up to a sound. Metal striking dirt. I looked out. He was digging again, in the same spot. It was too dark to see clearly, so I stepped outside and peered over the fence. He stood knee-deep in the hole, breathing heavily. Then he froze, slowly turned his head straight in my direction. I ducked down. My heart was pounding in my temples. A few minutes later, his back door slammed. The lights went out. I climbed over the fence. The hole was deeper than before. Something lay at the bottom. A black garbage bag torn open on one side. A piece of fabric stuck out. Blue fabric with tiny white rockets. I remembered those pajamas. Ethan wore them to a barbecue a week before he disappeared. I wanted to run. I really did, but something forced me to lean closer. And that's when I heard a voice. "Daniel." Not a scream, not a whisper. Just behind me. I turned. Michael stood 2 steps away. He didn't look angry. He looked relieved. "You were always too curious," he said. I don't remember hitting the ground. I only remember the sharp pain in the back of my head, the metallic taste in my mouth. When I came to, I was lying inside the same hole. The bag was beside me, torn open wider. I saw a bone. Small, not an adult's. Michael stood above me, his silhouette framed by the moonlight. "You don't understand," he said calmly. "I couldn't let them take him. He had to stay with me." He lifted my shovel. "And now you'll stay too." I screamed, maybe, or maybe I only thought I did. Dirt poured onto my face, into my mouth, into my eyes. The last thing I saw was him looking down without a trace of emotion. I don't know how much time has passed. It's dark, tight, There's barely any air. And the worst part, I'm not alone. Something is lying next to me. Sometimes at night, I hear someone walking above us. Sometimes digging. Sometimes blinds being pulled shut. And today, I heard him say to someone, "If you see anything, you'd better stay quiet." I think he's going to borrow a shovel again. They were always watching. I knew it long before I realized it was real. My first house, my childhood street, and two boys, Liam and Owen, who should never have been part of my life. I didn't know them well. In fact, I had barely spoken to them once or twice. But that day, they changed my childhood forever. My brother and I were playing basketball on the driveway when Liam suddenly appeared from their yard. His gaze was empty and cold, as if he could read our thoughts. "Is it true that you're moving?" he asked, his voice sounding like a warning. He suggested we go shoot BB guns by the river the next day. At first, it seemed like an innocent game. We agreed, but even then, something in his posture sent a chill down my spine. The next day they showed up, camouflage, a bag heavy and dark as night. We walked to the woods in silence, and every sound, the crack of twigs, the rustle of leaves, felt like a threat. Liam pulled out the guns and said, "These are real weapons." Owen pulled out a loaded pistol and aimed it at the trees. When I realized this wasn't a game, fear and confusion hit me all at once. I grabbed the guns from my brother and put them back in the bag. "We're not comfortable with this," I said. They looked at us, eyes dark as an abyss. A curse word followed us as we left, the last thing we heard that evening. But the real nightmare began later that night. I woke to a cold breath on my face. My window was open, something hard pressed against the back of my head. "SHH," someone whispered behind me. I froze. It was Liam. "If you tell anyone, I'll come back and destroy you and your family," he whispered. I answered in a trembling voice, "Okay." He shoved me with the gun and then disappeared out the window. Every night my brother and I felt their gaze. We heard footsteps in the yard, strange creaks of trees, shadows behind the curtains. They were waiting. Every sound felt like a signal that danger was approaching. A week before the move, a rock shattered my window at 1:00 a.m. Liam aimed a pistol straight at me. I dove to the floor, my heart hammering in my chest, and they burst into laughter as if it were a game and I was just their puppet. Then things got even stranger. We found small signs in the yard, sticks arranged in arrow shapes pointing toward our house, tiny stones placed on the porch like markers of their paths. They knew where we were even when we hadn't gone outside. 2 more times they followed my brother and me, and one day we spotted Liam standing on the neighbor's roof, watching us through binoculars. His gaze was empty and his smile was predatory. We realized they weren't just dangerous, they were hunting. We moved, but the sense of fear remained. Every shadow, every sound in the night reminded me of them. Sometimes I see their faces in reflections of light, hear whispers in empty rooms. They never forget, they are always near, and sometimes I feel like we never truly escaped them.